Chapter 4. How the art of playing the comedy of modesty meets with a perfectly humble obstacle. I left for Poland, trying to convince myself that my power of dissimulation meant that I had certain gift as an actor. At 21 years old, after 6 years of solitude as a poor and ambitious student, I had to become again a loving, obliging, obedient, and pious young man. More pious, simply dying to enter a seminary. A nice act for my debut. I thought I could easily deceive my so-called mother, but what about the doctor? I really feared his diagnosis. That man was probably the only one whom I feared in my life. Nevertheless, I must at all costs, at any price whatsoever, fool him too. Not that I could not enter a seminary without his help, but to prove my strength, I must never be suspected. The doctor was for me a test of my own worth. I rang the home bell at about 6:00 p.m., so as to be a short hour with her before his return. It was she who opened the door to me. She had aged very much and had no makeup on her face. She seemed ill. She began to tremble and started crying. Women are really where they belong when they are in harems, where men visit them only in case of absolute necessity. I asked forgiveness for my long silence, hoping that this question of repentance would be quickly settled and forgotten before the doctor came in. I had no idea of manifesting male repentance in the presence of a true male. With her, I knew that we would quickly come to the joy of meeting again and to plans for my future. As she could not have a greater desire than wanting me to become a Catholic priest. I told her at once of my compelling vocation. The poor stupid woman was so happy that I could have made her believe anything. She wanted to know how the idea of this beloved vocation had come to me. I had vaguely thought of various explanations, but I rejected preparing such a scene in advance. Generally, what is premeditated does not sound so well as what is invented on the spot. I made up a story of an apparition quite proper to win her. I knew that the doctor was suspicious of such things, but she had a weakness for the mysterious. Thus I was sure to divide them and strengthen my position. While they discussed me, they would leave me alone. I therefore told her a story of a heavenly apparition, being careful to stamp in my memory all its details so as I never to contradict myself. I thought that it was ironic to pretend that I had a visit from Saint Anthony of Padua. Could not the patron saint of lost objects also to look after lost children? So this saint is so popular that you can impute on him any miracle whatsoever. Pious people will always fall for it. Therefore Saint Anthony of Padua visited me evidently with the little child Jesus in his arms. While I was at it, I might as well make of it a beautiful devotional picture, as we were floating in the most syrupy piety. The doctor entered. I was relieved to see a reasonable being come in, but I saw at once that he did not believe me, that the game would be a hard one to win, but therefore more amusing. It was up to me to convince my foster father. I had to bring him at least to pretend that he believed me. But this evening it was rather distressing. The doctor was one of the rare men, really intelligent, whom I have met. The game was all the more pleasing. The following day I asked them to meet the bishop. My foster mother knew him since childhood. He received me nicely but without enthusiasm. He must be one of those Catholics who think that it is better not to excite a vocation, but on the contrary to oppose it. A real vocation must triumph over all obstacles. Happily, I knew well this state of mind, and I was not vexed by it. But I acknowledged that such an attitude can cause confusion in someone who has no vocation. As for me, I knew how to remain Christianly humble, and it seemed impossible that the bishop should be displeased with me. Nevertheless, he requested that I present myself to the pastor of my parish, and also to a religious noted for having the gift of mind reading. This gibberish simply meant that this good man was capable of detecting false vocations from simply imaginary to the frankly perverse. I first went to see my pastor, a brave and very simple man. He was hoping to see a vocation blossom in his parish, and he would have given me all that he possessed, that is, almost anything to announce this happy news. In order that my holy enthusiasm would be somewhat benefit to me in the doctor's mind, I asked my foster mother to invite this clergyman to dinner. It was delightful because this man had the soul of a child, and in the presence of this rare phenomenon, but deeply appreciated in the trial of canonization, the doctor felt ill. How can an honest Christian resist saints? I was therefore much comforted when I went to meet the religious whose perspicacity was so highly praised. At first sight, this man seemed to me hard to bear, on account of his slowness, the frequent silences that he seemed to affect. Nevertheless, I can bring out all the cliches up to describe the true priestly vocation. I laughed in my inner self because, of course, how could this man imagine that my secret thoughts could be more revealed to him? And how could he know that I had secret thoughts? Our interview was lengthy, but I at last took a liking to it. I spoke with facility and listened to myself with satisfaction. Of course, I manifested the most inquisitive modesty. It is indeed a self-styled virtue, very easy to imitate, and is even a very amusing game. And I was an ace at modesty, as well as many other acts. I dared not speak of my supposed apparition of Saint Padua. Thus, in the case of my mother had revealed this fact to him, he would be edified to see that I kept silence about it. Nevertheless, I was proud to let him know that I never had any connection with a woman, and that I was altogether disinterested in that sex, only good for procreation. I thought that this ought to be a certain sign of a vocation. I thought I could use the word vocation to express the trait that I could choose in the ranks of the party, and that my indifference toward women became a kind of predestination. An apostle or anti-apostle must marry his apostolate. I was therefore very eloquent each time that a word apostolate would return to our conversation. It must have seemed evident that I would become a very zealous priest. This religious tried to lay me many traps, notably to bring me to lie. Childish business. An intelligent man knows that lying must not be used, or even rarely. And even when I felt obliged to tell lies, I have too much memory to contradict myself by revealing the truth. No, a good lie must simply become a truth for him who creates it, and also for all his listeners. This religious wanted to know why I had left my adopted parents for 6 years without news. Then I became moved. It was easy to review the past and live again the vague pain that had prompted me to leave for Russia. But justifiably, this prudent man seemed to fear that I had become a communist. I told him that I was not interested in politics. As for my 6 years of silence, I was simply not able to explain them. I believe it to be a good thing to appear sometimes as a feeble and vulnerable man. The people in command are then very happy to protect you. I even insisted, saying that This silence would be the remorse of my whole life, letting him understand that my mother felt rewarded for it by my priestly vocation. Thus, the only man would not want to hurt my mother's feelings. Thus, the old man would not want to hurt my mother's feelings by taking away from her the only joy of her old age. Obviously, I did not use such imprudent words, but only hoped inwardly that it would be so. As our conversation went on, it became more and more cordial. I was very satisfied we parted as friends. Many days went by without news, as if the church were not in a hurry to have one more seminarian. On my part, I worked with ardor on the next directives which would reach the whole world by way of Russia. When at last I was called to the bishop's house, the earth seemed to open up in front of me, because the bishop quietly told me that the religious thought that I did not have a vocation.